What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we are talking about where do bass go in early spring and the best ways to catch them. I don't know about you guys, but I am ready to thaw out. I am super excited to be thinking about the possibilities of fishing in warmer weather, right? Shorts, sun shirts, up shallow, whether we're flipping grass or throwing a chatterbait. Very excited here in the next few weeks to really talk about and show you guys some springtime fishing. But before that, let's talk about where these fish are going. You know, it is still cold out. It's still kind of, just here last week, we got a storm here on the Tennessee River. And for those of you guys that are familiar with the area, just above Guntersville, Chickamauga, we got Watts Bar, Kentucky Lake, that system. Here on Chickamauga, we have winter pool where they draw the water down for these types of storms that we had here just a couple days ago. And in a matter of just a couple days, this lake went up to full pool, almost above full pool into flood stage. And that can really throw a wrench into your fishing, right? When this lake goes up and down, lakes out west. I saw it on Shasta during the one bass, lakes rising, several feet a day. Where do those fish go? Because we're still dealing with colder weather patterns. We might have a week or so in the 70s, high 60s, where it starts really feeling like spring, and then boom, the next couple days, we get hit with like Arctic blasts, right? And these fish don't know what to do. So that's what we're gonna talk about today. Just kind of start thinking about these fish moving. When you get a couple of warmer, consistent days, those fish start to move. When you get water levels starting to rise, these fish are on the move. So depending on the types of fisheries that you're fishing, whether it's a reservoir or a tidal system, a river system, a natural lake, a pond, where are these fish going and how are they reacting to the changing water temps, the changing weather temps, the changing water levels? So if nothing else, be excited for springtime bass fishing because it's coming quickly. And don't be left behind. Don't wait for those warming trends. Don't wait for that stuff to start tying on your spring power fishing baits. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Where these fish are going, kind of get your mind ready for springtime fishing, the pre-spawn, if you will. Now, I'm fully aware that guys down in the southern states, down in Florida, those guys are already spawn fishing. They're already bed fishing. They're already sight fishing, fishing up shallow. So you guys will have to, disregard this information because you've already lived through it. You're fishing through it. But for the rest of the country, it's almost here. It's almost springtime. And that's one of my favorite times of the year to fish. Like I said earlier, warmer weather, warmer water temps, more active fish, shallow fish, power fishing. I just love it. So to backtrack a little bit, pay attention to your weather patterns, pay attention to your water temps. Example, Chickamauga, like I said, came up, right? We've taught through the years, as those water levels rise, do those fish rise with it and go. If it's been cold and you get a warm southern storm that dumps a bunch of rain and all those creeks start going, guess where those fish go? They bypass all those points and they run right to the back to that warmer water. They are active, they make that push. Now, hopefully it's warmer water. What we had here last week, or just a couple days ago, was colder water. We had water temps here in the low pushing mid 50s, and then we got 6 to 8 inches of rain, and it basically flooded everything. So then we had cold water it dropped it down into the low to mid 40s, about a 10-degree difference, and it got muddy, chocolate milk. So those are the absolute worst conditions for me. I hate fishing cold, muddy water. But it's not always like that. Some of those storms come from the south, they're warm water. So think about that. Pay attention on your fishery. If you get that warmer weather, a week of warmer weather, you get that higher water level and you get that water coming into the lake that's warmer. head straight to the back. And we're gonna talk about baits here shortly, but head straight to the back. Bypass that main lake point, that secondary point, run to that moving water, and you guys will find fish. Now, whether you're a reservoir guy or a river guy or a tidal guy, these fish position alike. So what I used to do out west, still fishing tournaments, fishing those big highland reservoirs, Oroville's, the Shastas, those types of lakes, when we'd get those late winter, early spring storms and those creeks and rivers start flowing, you get the waterfalls in the back of every cut, you know, I would run to that moving water, but I'd also be looking for the lake to river or creek transition. Typically there's a visible line where that clearer or stained or dirtier water meets the clearer or stained lake. You know, they're never the same color. So look for that line. And the telltale sign is seeing that line, obviously checking your units for your water temps, but also the debris on the surface, right? You'll see where that current stops, and you'll see the branches and the leaves and just all the little debris on the surface where that lake and river or creek water is mixing. And man, right there on that line can be lights out. So that's just one of the situations that you guys might find yourself in this early springtime. You know, we're still in February, but depending on where you are in the country, this stuff matters right now. So start thinking about it. The guys up north, obviously you got a little bit more time to prepare and think about, but for the rest of the country, man, it is go time. So let's run through the different fisheries real quick, because those of you guys that are familiar with the channel know that there's, you know, highland reservoirs, lowland reservoirs, river systems, tidal systems, natural lakes and ponds. So highland reservoirs, right? Typically taller, narrower dam. You're damming up a river or a major creek, a river, and you have long river arms, lots of steep banks, lots of bluff walls, lots of points, main lake points, secondary points as you head up those rivers. But understand that in all of these fisheries, these fish are going to flatter banks. Even if you're in a current system, less current. They're looking for the backs of pockets, backs of bays, warmer water. Look for those bays that have sunlight on them longer in the day. They're gonna warm up quicker. That's gonna have warmer water. That applies to all of your types of fisheries, even ponds. Some of those bigger ponds, you might have a shoreline that faces the sunlight a lot longer, more hours of the day. Those fish are gonna pull to that side, that warmer water. But back to the highland reservoirs, again, check that main lake point, work your way through those secondary points, and you know, closest to those spawning bays. And again, if you find yourself in that scenario with that warmer water coming in the back, shoot to the back and then work your way back, fish your way back and find those fish. Any of these fisheries, if you guys are catching smaller than average fish for your fishery, you guys will know what that is depending on the types of fisheries you're on and the weight limits, the size limits. If you're fishing and you're catching smaller than average size fish, those are the males. The males typically make that push first for the spawn. The females are usually a stage or two behind them, so you can work back from there to find those bigger females. But lowland reservoirs, a lot less river arms, long river arms, a lot less bluff walls, but out on the main body, you typically have more humps, more saddles. Maybe you have some creek channels. Those fish are gonna use just like a road to find their way back. They're gonna use that little break as those creek channels meander through the main body to a bay. They're gonna use that as like a little road. They're gonna hang on the edges as they work their way back. Same thing, you get those warm storms, head to the back. Now, the complete opposite. Say you have those fish pegged, you know what secondary point they're on or wherever they're at, however you're catching them. If you get a cold storm that runs through, maybe it's not even a lot of precipitation, a lot of rain, but it's a week of colder weather. Those fish, for the most part, they never backtrack. So wherever they were pre-storm, they're either gonna be there or maybe 1 point back. They're not gonna go do the full transition back in reverse, right? Like they do in the fall when they head out. They're gonna just go out and suspend, maybe head out a little bit to deeper water, less affected by those temperature changes, but they're never gonna completely go back to where they started, if that makes sense. So they typically lock down, typically lock jaw. Once you get a couple days of consistent weather, whether it is colder than it has been in the previous weeks, if you get a couple days of similar weather temps, then those fish will start eating again. But highland reservoirs, lowland reservoirs, river systems. I just told you, Chickamauga went from not even being able to launch a boat here to full pool, and these fish head right to the back. Here in this situation, we had really tough fishing conditions, cold, muddy water, everything flooded and blew out, lots of debris in the water, but colder water. Like I said, it dropped 10 degrees, so that really puts those fish on lockdown. You have to work hard for them. But typically, these fish are going to be pulling out of the main river system, and they're going to be pulling up into the backwaters. So right now, they were staging out there on the lips on the main river channel, and then as soon as that water warms up, or as soon as that water starts flowing out of the back, they pop up and shoot to the back. So if you're on a river system that doesn't have a lot of backwaters, I will tell you guys, when you get these storms that blow through, these storms that run through and increase the current flow, it actually makes fishing in the rivers really, really easy to locate those fish. Now, what do I mean by that? So typically you have a river, right? That's this wide. Those fish are spread out through that. They're out there in the middle of the river. They don't mind that current. They might be behind a boulder. They might be behind, you know, some kind of current seam or break. But when that river goes from that to that, or that to that, and starts really flowing, it pushes all of those fish that were here up into the eddies, up into the current breaks that you can visibly see. They get out of that fast current and they get into that slower current, some of those eddies and back flowing areas, and it takes all of those fish that were spread out through that river system and congregates them into key spots, and you guys can load the boat once you find where those fish are staged. So it can actually get fairly fun and pretty easy fishing if you know what to look for. Ponds and natural lakes, talk about those two together. You guys know they typically don't have a lot of movement. They typically don't have a lot of water fluctuation. But what you do have, sometimes you have shallower ponds or shallower natural lakes. So you get a lot of temperature fluctuation, and that can really mess with those fish. But same thing, we're looking for offshore structure that those fish can transition to as they work to the areas closest to those backs of those spawning bays. Same thing like the lowland reservoirs, look for those little creek channels if you have them. Look to the points closest to the mouths of those creeks, wherever that moving water is. If there is some moving water coming in, run to those creeks and you guys will find those fish. As far as the pond fishermen, for the most part, all winter long, you've been fishing the deepest water. Maybe you're throwing a jig out on the dam. If you have a dam, you're fishing that deeper water. Now just kind of work your way towards shallow. If you want, you can work towards that creek coming into that pond that's feeding that pond, fish there and work your way back, and eventually you will run into them. All right, again, briefly, we talked about the different types of fisheries and where those fish are going, how they're moving. Like I said, we'll do a more in-depth video here in the next couple weeks on that. But let's talk about some of the baits that I have tied on for this time frame, for this late winter, early spring. Again, it's all about covering water and finding these schools of fish, because they do school up. They will typically, when you get a bite this time of the year, you can get several bites in that area. So make a mental note of where you're getting those bites. With that said, this time of the year, with that water temp fluctuation, with that water level fluctuation, where you caught them yesterday, they might not be there. They might be a couple hundred yards away. They might be a quarter mile away. You know, Matt and I have fished a lot of fisheries through the years together, and we've been in some crazy weather systems, lake systems, and my PB smallmouth, I'll tell you a quick story real quick. Early spring, cold water coming in, the lake's rising, no joke, like 4 feet a day, and we're catching them on chartreuse and blue swim baits. Catching big, I mean, 30-pound bags of smallmouth, and we're just wrecking shop. But we're visibly seeing the lake rise, right? So these fish they rise with the lake level. They move with that rising lake level and to feed on, right? So I literally make a bomber cast with a chartreuse and blue swim bait up to an area that was out of the water just an hour or so, maybe shorter before that. Throw it up there, start winding that thing back, 7-pound smallmouth. I mean, these fish literally move with that water level. So just a quick story for you guys. These fish push to the back. With that moving water, they are on the move. So if you catch them one day and the lake has risen, continue working to the back. They're gonna move. I've seen full-on wolf packs of fish swim by the boat as they're just like, we're out, we are moving, and it is one of the craziest things you will ever see. So for the most part, baits this time of the year, it's all fast moving baits. I am covering a lot of water. Okay, I will link all these baits down below in the video description. I'm not gonna go too in depth on these, but I wanna give you some ideas, some situations that I just painted, and some ideas for some baits to throw in those situations. So I find myself spinnerbait. If I find myself running to the back, fishing muddy, stained, dirty water, I love throwing a spinnerbait. Whether it's the Megabass, the SV3, chartreuse and white, chartreuse, all depends on the water clarity, or the nickels. These guys right here, a spinnerbait is one of the best baits you can throw in those situations. Bright, it's bold, it thumps, it's fairly weedless. You know, what do you get when you have lakes that have been down for a long time and then abundance of water, right? You have flooded brush, you have flooded grass, remnants of shoreline, maybe it's tules. Now that stuff's underwater, it's all into play. A spinnerbait is an awesome, probably the best way to catch them moving quickly in that situation, okay? That stained, moving water, a spinnerbait is an awesome choice, okay? Now let's talk about some normal fishing. So maybe you had that storm, you have that higher water, but now it's kind of simmered down a little bit. You might be fishing a secondary point or a main lake point, working your way back to those bays. Man, it's really hard to beat the Alabama rig. You guys know how much I love this. This is actually our that's our tactical mini flex, lighter wire, 3 dummies, 3 hooked baits. This is a special bait for us. This has caught so many double digits for us through the years. Again, lighter wire has a lot of flow, a lot of realistic movements when you have handle twitches or rod twitches. You get that thing to compress and expand. You know, I just caught a 9-pounder a couple weeks back on this guy right here, that exact rig actually. But an A-rig, more importantly, something with blades, something with a little bit of flash, a little bit of vibration. You might have that stained water, dirty water. There's been times where I've actually swapped these out and went with gold blades. But again, this isn't an in-depth A-rig springtime fishing video. Just something to think about. Throwing blades. If you're one of those guys in those reservoirs, typically clearer water, a little bit colder water, you can go with a bladeless rig, more natural, less flash, less vibration, a little bit more realistic looking, or not realistic looking, but less metal and flash and things, a lot less going on. And then if you're one of those guys that's in that river system, you know, throwing heavier baits, throwing bigger baits. This is our actual flex rig. You can see this is the flex rig. This is the mini flex rig, a lot smaller. And then we also have the micro, which is basically fits in your hand, but some kind of A-rig. Of course, we designed this one with lighter wire to flex. Has 3 dummies, 3 hooked baits, and it works extremely well all the way through, you know, winter, all the way through spring. I love throwing a version of an Alabama rig. It just mimics a ball of bait fish so well. Again, we're moving water. Now let's talk about a chatterbait. Now is the time to be thinking about throwing on some kind of bladed jig. Whether it's, I personally like the jackhammer or the Evo, the Elite from Z-Man, painted blades. We can throw those red baits. We're gonna be doing a video on that here shortly. But you know, throwing the bright reds, it just works extremely well in this time of the year. But whether it's a jackhammer or an Evo Elite or your favorite bladed jig, I don't care what brand it is or style it is, just think about throwing a chatterbait, okay? Now is that time. Again, you find yourself in that situation where you need to throw one of these spinner baits. A great option is a chatterbait as well. Again, I'm going with bright colors. If I'm not in that muddy water, that stained water, I might tone it down a little bit and go with like an electric shad. But chucking and winding, covering water. That is the tip of the day. Cover water, find those active fish, because you're probably gonna have to find them again tomorrow as they're on their move, on their way to where they're going, okay? But a chatterbait is a great bait. It's fairly weedless. You can throw it in flooded timber. You can throw it in brush piles, above, through brush piles. It's just an all-around workhorse, and it shines right now all the way through spring. I love throwing a chatterbait. Next up, some kind of crankbait. Whether it's a speed crank, if you're going to deeper waters, the Tactical DD, or a Spro rock crawler, those are two awesome options. This one obviously deeper. This one is great, real good wobble, fishing around rock. It deflects extremely well, but some kind of crankbait. Again, we're covering water, okay? We can get down in those depths. Some of the depths we can get down and deflect, unlike a spinnerbait or a chatterbait. But whether it's a chartreuse and blue or some kind of red craw pattern, those are two of my favorite colors this time of the year. High visibility, and the fish just smoke them. If you're a guy that needs something a little bit shallower, don't be afraid to throw a square bill. Start thinking about it, guys. These fish are going shallow. We caught fish yesterday in less than a foot of water in 44-degree water temp that was muddy, like less than 2 inches of visibility, okay? It works. These fish are extremely crazy, especially here on the Tennessee River. These fish don't know what shallow is. Shallow is not a word in their dictionary. I've seen them where they have their dorsal fin out of the water as they are pushing up shallow. Now, it's not like that everywhere in the country, but if you're on a fishery that's like that, a square bill can be an awesome bait to chuck and wind, cover a lot of water, deflect when you hit that flooded whatever, or that overgrowth of grass or brush pile. You know, pause it, let that thing float up, and then burn it. Pause, get those fish to react, but that is an awesome option this time of the year. The only other crankbait that I have tied on is going to be some kind of lipless crankbait. Here on the Tennessee River, it's really hard to beat that TN70, the TN60. It's just a bait that works extremely well. Out west, it's the LV500. The Nomad, that Swimtrex Max, is another awesome player in that game, but a lipless crankbait is another choice that works extremely well this time of the year. Last but not least, if you're a guy that wants to chase big bites, now is the time to be throwing some kind of glide bait. Now, I held up this S-Waver 168 in light trout. Those of you guys that have been following us for a long time know that this thing is one of the OGs in the glide bait game. It's fairly inexpensive for its category, and it just straight catches them. Whether it's giant spotted bass out west or big largemouth on the Tennessee River. I've caught them down in Florida. I mean, they just eat that thing. It doesn't break the bank. It's not super giant where you need custom or high-end or bigger swim bait gear. It's something you can throw on your favorite jig rod, and it gets big bites. Again, these fish are going to be moving up. That's another great opportunity for you. And then last but not least, whether you're in a river system, a clear water system, a reservoir system, some kind of underspin, having that extra flash on there. This bait right here is just shredded. I don't know if you guys can see the teeth marks in that thing or not, but I don't know how many fish I caught just the other day on this, fishing a river system. And that chartreuse and blue paired up with that underspin is just a killer, especially this time of the year. But obviously you guys can be throwing a jerk bait if you find yourself fishing fish that are suspended in treetops or whatever situation. There's a lot of different tools, if you will, for fishing this time of the year. But these are just some of my favorites. These are my confidence baits. But guys, let's all be excited. Spring bass fishing is coming. It's an awesome time of the year to be out on the water. We got Fish that haven't been pressured for the most part all winter, and now they're up shallow, they're moving shallow, and they are ready to eat. Guys, if you have any questions, please leave those down below in the comment section. I will try to get to those as soon as possible. Don't wait for that warming trend. Get out before it, find those fish. Those fish aren't necessarily gonna wait for that 70 and 80 degree weather. They are gonna be on the move. They are gonna be chowing, eating, feeding up for that pre-spawn transition. Guys, like I said, leave those comments down below, questions down below in the comment section. I'll try to get those as soon as possible. As always, thank you for watching. We appreciate the support. If you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys in the next video.